Hello, everyone. On behalf of IBM Systems Magazine, I'd like to welcome you to our event. My name is Janine Donnelly. I am the manager of webinars for IBM Systems Magazine, and I will be the moderator for today's event. We will be holding a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. You may ask a question at any time during the event by entering it into the Q&A panel. If you experience technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the Q&A panel to alert us, and someone will assist you. You may download a PDF version of the slide deck by clicking on the drop-down menu labeled Event Resources on the left side of your screen. Also be sure to check out the Event Resources tab for a customer case study on Mainframe Virtual Tape. You can download both assets from the platform without leaving the webcast. Today's webinar, The Value of Mainframe Virtual Tape, a Customer Perspective, is sponsored by Optica Technologies Incorporated. Our featured speakers today are Sean Seitz, Chris Olson, and Richard Beach. Sean is the Vice President of Technical Services at Optica and is responsible for technical sales, services delivery, and product support worldwide. Sean has over 25 years of mainframe experience in various executive positions, including technical sales and support, product management, business development, and consulting services. Chris's 40 years of mainframe experience include technical training, consulting, pre-sales, implementation, and post-sales support with a variety of companies. In his time at Optica, Chris has installed, implemented, and supported Optica's ZVTs at customer locations around the world. Rich Beach is a systems engineer and architect for a supermarket chain in the northeastern U.S. With over 30 years of industry experience, Rich's expertise cover a wide range, including systems engineering and architecture, data center design and infrastructure, disaster recovery, and management. Today, he'll share his experience with the evaluation, implementation, and support of Optica's ZVT virtual tape solution. With our introductions complete, Sean, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Janine. Really appreciate everybody being here today. We recognize that your time is very valuable, and we appreciate you joining us for the next hour. First off, I'd like to thank Janine and IBM Systems Magazine. They do a wonderful job of supporting these events, and her team is extremely professional, so thanks to the IBM Systems Magazine team. By way of an agenda today, I wanted to just review what we're going to cover and the call flow here. I'd like to give you an understanding of Optica's background first. I'll spend just a few minutes making sure you have an appreciation for who we are and where we've come from. And then we're going to talk about our view of the virtual tape market. And it's a bit unique, so it might be interesting to you to see a little bit different perspective on the market and the players in the market. We're, of course, going to overview the ZVT family of virtual tape products. Want to make sure that you're familiar with the three models within the ZVT family. We'll highlight the feature set of each and the benefit of each and how it covers the spectrum of requirements within the marketplace. And then we're going to hit on maintenance and support quickly. I want to make sure that although quality products are very important to the mainframe customer, we recognize that maintenance and support is a close second when it comes to providing solutions to the mainframe user. So we want to make sure that you understand the value we offer in the category of maintenance and support. And then I'm going to turn it over to Chris Olson. He's going to give you a view of the graphical user interface of ZVT and give you a flavor for how it's managed, how it's easily set up and managed, I should say. And then from there, we're going to introduce a ZVT customer, Richard Beach, and he's going to give you his direct perspective and involvement in the evaluation and selection of the solution, as well as the implementation of the product and the ongoing use of the product. I think you're going to find it very interesting. He's going to talk to you about his overall experience, including some of the issues they experienced at implementation and how they were overcome. And then finally, we're going to have time for some questions. So please don't be shy about entering any questions that you may have, and we'll get to as many as we can during the live webinar. And then any that aren't addressed during the live webinar, we will certainly address directly back to you after the conclusion of the webinar. So by way of an introduction to Optica, if you're not familiar, this year is actually our 50th year in business. So we've been around for 5 decades. The last 25 years of those 50, we have focused exclusively on mainframe connectivity and storage products. So we got our start actually in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, with a line of channel switching products. So we actually offered products that switched the bus and tag channel, and we competed with the likes of Data Switch and T-Bar and IBM themselves, actually. The IBM had a product known as the 3814, 2914. Those model numbers may sound familiar to you. So from there, we migrated into protocol conversion. So by the mid to late 90s, we had developed an SCON to bus and tag converter as IBM approached the announcement and the end of life of bus and tag channels, the parallel channels on the mainframe. So IBM themselves obviously had their own bus and tag converter, SCON to bus and tag converter. They called it the 93, oh gosh, it just jumped out of my brain. Anyway, the muffler, right? The product that looked like a physical muffler. It took SCON from the mainframe and converted. It was the 9034. Pardon me. The 9034 was IBM's version, and we made a compatible version in the late 90s to the IBM 9034. And then it was actually in the year 2002 that our official strategic partnership with IBM mainframe division was kicked off, when we signed a contract to be the exclusive provider of SCON to bus and tag converter products to the mainframe customer base. So IBM actually discontinued their manufacturing of the product in 2002 and contracted with IBM. So since that time, in the early 2000s, we've shipped over 25,000 SCON to bus and tag converters. So if you are a mainframe customer on the line today or listening to this webcast, it's likely that you've actually used one of our products, and specifically, most likely, our SCON to bus and tag converter. So we've enjoyed that strategic relationship with IBM all the way through the evolution of the end of SCON. So as IBM approached the end of SCON on the mainframe, they likewise contracted with Optica, and we created the Prism product, which takes the FICON interface back to SCON. So that was the follow-on conversion product. So these products have allowed mainframe users to continue to use their older legacy devices and applications as they modernize on their mainframe. So again, you have likely experienced Optica products relative to our protocol conversion solutions. So thousands of data centers around the world have deployed our products. So we have clearly developed a deep bench of mainframe skills over time. Certainly relative to mainframe protocol, I would say we have world-class experience and knowledge of mainframe protocol and have accumulated a deep bench of skills across all facets of our business, from sales to technical services into engineering. And we have leveraged that experience over the years and developed our expertise around tape emulation, and tape operations. So developing a virtual tape solution was a natural extension for us as a company, keeping in mind that all of our protocol conversion products predominantly attach to tape or devices that emulate tape. So we grew our experience base over the years around tape, and therefore, with the encouragement of the Z Systems division in Poughkeepsie, we developed our ZVT solution and announced it in early 2015. Okay, so I mentioned I was going to talk about our view of the mainframe virtual tape market. So in terms of the mainframe space and the size of markets within the mainframe space, we estimate the virtual tape market to be in the neighborhood of 600 million. Certainly, all industry analysts agree that it's less than $1 billion annual market, and most fall in the range of 600 million to 700 million annual market for mainframe virtual tape. there have been, over time, there have been the big three providers, right? IBM, Oracle, and EMC, now Dell EMC. And they have terrific products, excellent products that have stood the test of time. But what we've recognized is, over time, given the size of this market that isn't the largest relative to mainframe industry standards, those offerings from the big three providers have actually migrated toward the high end in terms of what they offer, in terms of the feature set, in terms of the storage capacity, and certainly price point. That's a small market that they're fighting for dollars in, and so therefore we've witnessed a migration in their offerings toward the higher end of the marketplace. And frankly, that leaves a gap. That leaves a large set of the marketplace that may not be a fit for the higher end solutions, right? The feature-rich, high-capacity, bigger dollar solutions. We feel like there was an opportunity, and that's what we address with the ZVT offering. So we look at the market. If you look at the market in terms of MIPS per customer or MIPS utilization per customer, we kind of view it as a barbell, and therefore the graphic here, right? With a barbell, you have a large concentration of users at the very low end, and you have a large concentration of users at the higher end. But if you zoom out a little bit and you pick a midpoint, and in this case we picked 5,000 MIPS, the market actually breaks down interestingly to about 60% that is running or utilizing less than 5,000 MIPS, and about 40% of the market that's utilizing 5,000 or more MIPS. So again, the higher end offerings from the big three, so to speak, the so-called big three, which are excellent offerings, are designed to address the top tier of the marketplace. And that's just the way it has developed and evolved. There's a significant entry cost. There's a significant capacity of storage that you have to invest in at the entry level, and certainly the price point to go with that. So we feel like the Optica ZVT offering is complementary to those, and it helps address a gap in the marketplace. And frankly, it's the majority of mainframe users. And this data has been validated by the mainframe division that we work with closely and we have a strategic relationship with. So the user that's 5,000 MIPS and below is an opportunity for Optica and our approach to the marketplace, in that we're targeting that mid-size customer by offering the appropriate level of features, the appropriate storage capacity offerings, and of course the price point to go with that. We're going to highlight what we call our Flex offering, which allows the customer to leverage their own storage, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that right now. So we have three models of the ZVT within the family. The very entry point, or the lower end solution, is known as the ZVT 3000i. This is a low-end, affordable, all-in-one mainframe virtual tape solution. It has onboard storage, so it is self-contained. You attach this to the mainframe via FICON, one or two FICON interfaces. It also supports SCON attachment. We license 8 virtual tape drives on this unit as a standard, and then optionally by RPQ we can go up to 16 virtual tape drives on the 3000i. This has 4 terabytes of internal RAID 5 storage. That's onboard included storage, and it's pre-configurable, simple to implement. That makes it ideal for replacement of 3490 and 3590 physical tape. And also we've used the 3000i to replace legacy virtual tape offerings from BusTech or EMC or other. So this is a good fit for those applications. The second model I'd like to introduce you to is known as the 5000 Flex. This is a bit industry unique. This offers the flexibility to the customer to leverage their own open system storage with the ZVT virtual tape engine. So if you have an investment, a strategic investment in a particular brand of NFS storage or fiber channel attached storage on the open system side of the data center, you can carve out a certain amount of that storage repository and leverage that for your mainframe virtual tape application using the ZVT. So the ZVT virtual tape engine is identical or nearly identical to the 3000i in that it attaches via FICON or SCON to the mainframe. We can license between 16 and 256 virtual tape drives. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute per node. It's available as a standard with 1 gig Ethernet connectivity to storage, and optionally 10 gigabit or fiber channel ports as well are available. Okay, the 5000 Flex model supports dedupe, replication, encryption, and these are the features of your storage that ZBT will fully support that you're already leveraging on your storage. Okay, we also offer and support high availability configurations as you scale up in size requirements-wise. We support multi-node configurations, port bonding, etc. for NFS storage. Okay, and then finally the third model is known as the 5000 INAS. So this is a solution for the customer that is interested in a fully integrated solution that includes the back-end storage. So the 5000 INAS comes with an appropriate number of virtual tape engines as we specify or design your solution, and then also between 8 terabytes up to a full petabyte of storage in a single cabinet. So this is a fully integrated solution, again, based on the same base model as the others, in that it attaches via FICON. It can be licensed to support up to 256 virtual tape drives, and also comes with dedupe, replication, and encryption features that it can support. Okay, so this solution is ideal for customers that are looking for that integrated solution. They want dedicated storage for their mainframe virtual tape application. And the 5000 Flex is going to be highlighted here today, most importantly because it's the product that was invested in by Richard and his company when they invested in the ZBT. So we're going to highlight the flexibility of the 5000 Flex unit in particular. So I want to touch on a few of the features that are consistent across all the models that are worth highlighting. We talked about the mainframe connectivity to FICON or 4SCON. The virtual tape drive licensing is done in a manner that allows us to price the solution, to design and price the solution to fit your requirement with an appropriate price point. So you can actually license in increments 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, or 256 virtual tape drives, again, to match the price point of the solution and the feature set to your requirement more appropriately. As far as operating system support, we support all operating systems as a standard, so that's an important point. This is not a special or an RPQ or a one-off to support VSE or ZVM, for example. The product supports all operating systems as a standard. As far as storage connectivity, these apply mostly to the Flex model. 1 gigabit NFS connectivity is standard. Optionally, you can add 10 gigabit support or 8 gig fiber channel support on the Flex unit. And of course, the 3000i, as we mentioned, has internal storage on board. Okay. As far as configuring ZBT in the mainframe gen, the ZBT is fully compatible with and emulates 3490 and 3590. So full emulation supports all those commands for those models of tape. You can configure the ZBT to emulate either one of those or both at the same time based on the policy that you assign to those volumes. Which leads us to a few of the other unique features. I mentioned policy-based volume management. Chris is actually going to show you a little bit more in depth about the policy-based volume management capability within the GUI. We do offer support for 32 virtual tape libraries per ZBT node. Every ZBT supports 500,000 virtual volumes. That's actually the practical, actual, I should say, number of volumes that are currently being supported by ZBT customers. So we actually have customers supporting that many virtual volumes in their configuration, but we also know through lab validation that ZBT will support upwards of 2 to 3 million virtual volumes. Okay, very unique to Optica's offering, ZBT. We do CRC checking. So we, as a mainframe company that has developed and supported mainframe products over the years, we recognize how important data integrity is. So every volume that is written and read back is CRC checked. Okay. We use a non-proprietary AWS file format this is an item that we have received some very positive feedback on. A lot of the competitive offerings use a proprietary file format. We feel it's very important that we write that data to storage using a non-proprietary and open file format. It's important that it's your data. You should be able to access that data with or without a ZVT virtual tape engine. So we feel that's a bit unique and also very important to many customers. We also offer an LTO tape feature. So you can attach LTO tape to the ZVT and import-export volumes to a physical LTO cartridge. So that's an optional feature. And then very importantly, we've made a very large investment into testing and integration with all the leading tape management products and tools. So for example, IBM, CA, Innovation, CSI, DTS Software. These are key partners of ours. And we've made a big investment in that we have their products in our lab. We have ensured full integration with these products that are common in the marketplace that you're using. And in most of these cases, they have our ZVT in their lab. So full integration with these products is very important to us. I mentioned that we wanted to highlight the 5000 Flex model. Just a couple of points worth emphasizing. You can attach any storage. So any investment that you have in open system storage, as long as it attaches via 1 gig or 10 gig Ethernet connectivity or fiber channel connectivity, you can use it and leverage it with ZVT. We've received some very surprising feedback, frankly, as we rolled out this family of products a couple of years ago, and now we've developed a very nice install base. The most surprising feedback is the value of this offering, and Richard Beach is going to talk a little bit about that as well, but we were surprised that we had so much positive feedback, that customers appreciated the flexibility, the ability to leverage an investment in open system storage in a product and a process that they already know, they use, they've already set up replication with, perhaps where they're replicating to a DR site for their distributed systems data. They can carve out some capacity for their mainframe virtual tape and leverage the same storage, the same feature set, the same capabilities. So this has been a very popular choice because of the flexibility, because of the affordability of the solution, and because of the confidence that customers have in Optica in supporting that package. I mentioned in the opening that I wanted to highlight a couple of quick points relative to maintenance and support. Again, Optica has been fortunate in that we have built a legacy and a reputation not only around quality products but around excellent support. And we take that to heart. We cherish that reputation, and we strive every day to maintain that. We know that's important to the mainframe customer. So, of course, we have a 7/24 call center, but more importantly, we're able to quickly, if there is an issue, we're able to quickly step through the diagnostic and troubleshooting phase of any issue, given the advanced tracing and logging that we have in our product. Over the years and decades, we've developed excellent logging and tracing that allows us to quickly diagnose issues. So we're very adept at that. We also partner with IBM. So it's a very comforting feeling, I think, to most customers to know that if we have to deploy hands and feet on site to address a hardware problem, for example, it will be IBM. So we partner with IBM. They are an extension of Optica's maintenance team in North America. So if you have an issue that requires on-site support, Optica dispatches the IBM technician to meet the part, replace the part, and correct the problem. So the same technician, the same SSR who you see for your mainframe support on site is likely going to be the SSR that responds to support a ZVT issue if required. So that's a bit unique and something we're very proud of. Okay, I wanted to take a pause here and introduce a poll question, get a little bit of audience participation. We might have some interesting feedback to chat about here. So Janine, I'd like to turn it over to you, if you don't mind, to introduce the poll question.
Great. Thanks, Sean. And ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, I have launched a poll. We are looking for your feedback on this. As a virtual tape user or technologist, what applications predominantly drive the need for virtual tape? And you can see there are 4 answers there. We're looking for predominantly, but in fact, if there is actually more than one answer that applies to your organization, you may choose more than one. Please hit submit, and we'll be sharing those results with the audience momentarily. And as you fill that out, I just wanted to remind you that to check out the Event Resources tab on the left side of your screen. From there, you can download a PDF version of the slide deck. I also noticed there are a number of governmental attendees. There's also a case study in there that you can download right from the platform. It won't kick you out of the webcast. It applies to everybody, but I think our governmental attendees will find it particularly interesting, so be sure to check that out as well. And the results are starting to come in. Sean, I just want to give it one more click here to be sure we capture all the responses. Okay, Sean, I think I'm going to go ahead and send those results out to the audience now.
Okay, thank you, Janine. So thanks for participating in this poll question. We thought it might be kind of interesting and fun to take a pause and gather a little feedback. You know, I think the results demonstrate sort of an evolution in the virtual tape arena, right? Because I think not that long ago, you know, several years ago, I think we would have seen a little different skew here in terms of customers' use case toward just backing up their primary storage, right? I think virtual tape used to be more predominantly or exclusively used for backing up your mainframe data. And your DASD, right, to virtual tape. Obviously, what we're seeing here is interesting. There's been an evolution. It's a little bit more of a balance findings across the board here, where long-term retention, I would have said, would have been your second, you know, most prevalent application. That remains actually it's higher than primary backup at this point. And then I think hierarchical or tiered storage is really accelerating in terms of use case. So this is interesting feedback and a pretty balanced across the 4 choices here. So we really appreciate it. We have customers, by the way, who are using our ZVT across all 4 of these, and so we have recognized kind of an evolution as well. So thank you for participating. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Chris Olson, and Chris is on my team. He's a very experienced architect and has traveled the world implementing ZVT over the last couple of years. And I'm going to ask Chris to spend a little bit of time giving you a quick flavor for the graphical user interface and some of the interesting features involved. So Chris, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And as Sean said, this is going to be a very quick, very high-level introduction to the ZVT graphical user interface, or the GUI. When you first log into the ZVT GUI, this is the landing screen, and it's set up in a very logical format. Across the top, there are 3 menu selections: management, maintenance, and status. And then down the left-hand side, there are menu buttons, in this case, network, I can't read it. There we go, user accounts, and so on. And as you select different management, maintenance, or status from across the top, the left-hand buttons change. For configuring the ZVT when it's initially installed, you start off with the management screen, the network screen that's showing, and this is where you set up the host name for the ZVT. In this case, it's Optica ZVT. And then you also supply IP addresses for the maintenance ports. One of the tabs in network is a multi-node configuration, where you can set up multiple ZVTs to interact together and use the same NFS file storage system to provide high availability. And then as you continue down through the left-hand menu items from network, user accounts, time and date, fairly self-explanatory, and then you work down through devices, mount points, and libraries. Devices are where you configure the device addresses that are going to be configured in the IOCP deck. We need to match the IOCP deck as far as unit add and control unit add, CU add and unit add. So the devices are configured in the ZVT to match the IO deck. Mount points are where the storage repository is configured, and here's where the ZVT is configured to connect either to a fiber channel storage array or NFS storage arrays on the back end. Libraries is the one we're going to take a look at in just a minute here on the next slide, but that is where the libraries that Sean mentioned, up to 32 libraries can be configured per ZVT, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail when we get to that slide. And then the last three, scripts, alerts, and manage. Scripts are going to be site-dependent scripts. They're Linux scripts that could run in the ZVT. They can be managed on that tab. Alerts is one that is very useful because it allows you to set up either SNMP or email alerts so you get notified if the ZVT detects something that's out of ordinary. And there are a handful of them. I believe it's 8 or 9 different alerts that you can select the ZVT to notify either via SNMP trap or via email alert. And then finally, the manage screen is where you manage the ZVT configuration, make backup of the configuration so that you can restore it at some other point, or if you have multiple configurations you want the ZVT to run at different times of the year, that can be managed in the Manage tab. So, but what we will look at next is the Library tab, which is where we have different libraries configured. In this example, I have a total of 6 libraries configured on the ZVT. This is my ZVT in our lab, libraries 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 7. The libraries are separate entities within the ZVT itself. So any tapes, virtual tapes that are in library 0 will be assigned to IO devices that are configured for library 0, and then any virtual tapes that are in library 1 are assigned to devices that are configured for library 1. So they're separate entities. So in a typical customer configuration, there might be 2 or 3 libraries, one for production, one for test, and perhaps one for DR. But the tapes that are in library 0 have absolutely no access to any of the other libraries within the ZVT. So that's an important file separation concept that the ZVT uses. And they can be split out on the back end at the storage repositories either into different mount points, different file systems, different LUNs on a fiber channel array, or they can be within the same file system and just different subfolders within the file system. So it's very flexible as to how it gets configured. One thing I did want to point out is under the action menu, here are some of the actions you can take within a library for library management. There's tape management, which we'll look at on the next slide. You can add policies, which is where you add virtual tapes into the ZVT library. So you select add policy for library 0, and then you put in a range of however many virtual tapes you want to add into library 0. You can list those policies so you can see how many tapes in a very good summary screen are in that particular library. And then there's 2 other ones that deal with more like physical tape management. The unmount button or the unmount selection lets you unmount a tape that the ZVT currently has mounted on a device to the mainframe. Elsewhere in the ZVT, there's a mount button, so you can manually mount and unmount tapes as well as do them via host control. So you can use a ZVT to IPL a system, for example, by manually mounting a tape and then IPL the system, and it reads off the IPL tape. And then the import button, and there's a corresponding export button elsewhere, but those are to gain access to the optional LTO tape cartridge that Sean was talking about earlier. So in this particular ZVT, I've got 26 virtual tapes in library 0, 36 in library 1, and then 100,000 in libraries 2 and library 4. So the only point there is that, each library is independent and can have, 100, 1,000 tapes or more, or just a few tapes depending upon how the library is being used. So the third slide we have is volume management, and this is a tape management screen that this particular screen is looking at library 0. So that's how I got to this screen. From the previous screen, I selected tape management, and this is the screen that comes up. It contains on multiple screens. This is page 1 of 1, but if you have 100,000 tapes, you could have 2,000 screens to look through. One line of information for every single VolSeer virtual tape that is on the ZVT in this library. And a couple of things I wanted to point out on here fairly quickly, and that is in the third column from the left, there's a type column, which has 2 ZVT command tapes and then 4 scratch tapes and 4 data tapes. Scratch and data correspond to host scratch tapes and host retained tapes in a tape management system. So a retained tape is the same as a data tape within the ZVT. The ZVT command tapes are tapes used to accept commands from the mainframe via JCL, and then the ZVT will execute those commands and provide a response back to the ZVT command tape. So very quickly, the host writes a command to the ZVT command tape, the ZVT executes it, writes the response back to the command tape, and then in the second step of the job, the host reads whatever the response is. So it's a mechanism to allow anything you can do on the GUI to also be done via JCL from the mainframe. In the upper left-hand corner, there's a whole bunch of sort criteria and search criteria, and this allows a very quick method for customers to find specific tapes. A good example is you want to know exactly what tapes were written on a certain date, say June 20th. You can set up the search criteria to find those, and then the sort criteria, which is the bottom line of the blue arrow that's pointed up, that can sort in ascending order or descending order, and you can sort by date or by VolSeer name. So you can very quickly find tapes that were written into the ZVT on any particular date. And that's just one example of using the sort criteria. Another one is trying to find the oldest scratch tape that's available. Customers do that as well using the screen. So, and that's a very 10,000-foot level overview of the GUI, just 3 of the screens out of the 20 plus that are in the GUI. And this was intended just to give you a very quick introduction. And anybody that would like to, we'd be happy to schedule a more in-depth WebEx with you and show you more details about the GUI, including JCL management of the ZVT itself. So with that, Sean, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Richard Beach, a ZVT customer of ours. And we're delighted to have Rich on the line here to share his experience. Really appreciate it, Rich, given you're a busy person, and we really appreciate you being here to give the audience your perspective on the evaluation, implementation, use of the product. So with that, Rich, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Not a problem. Happy to help out. I know that whenever anyone is spending the kind of money that gets spent on mainframes, it's good to have an idea of how it's going to go with a customer. So I'm more than happy to do this. Just to give you a quick overview, I do work for a medium-sized grocery chain. We're in the northeast of the United States. We have 135 stores. Geographically, we're in New York, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Vermont, and Massachusetts. All told, about 20,000 employees, full and part-time. And our mainframe handles a number of different loads, but in our case, it tends to be payroll, accounts payable and receivable, some order processing and things of that nature. So really, it's at the very heart of our business and extremely important. Our problem was pretty simple. We had existing BusTech 2000s, and I got the notice that said, hey, we're not going to support those at all anymore. So we kind of put ourselves behind the 8 ball with respect to having to come up with another solution before they went out of support. So we had a number of criteria that had to be met. First, we had to have an open format system. The MDLs did not because they had compression that was put on that was proprietary. So we wanted to get out of that. We didn't want to be in a position where we couldn't easily manage our own data, extract data out into other formats and the like. So we wanted to make sure that that was the case. We wanted to leverage existing NFS backend storage. In our particular instance, we are using particularly cheap and deep Dell compellent storage. We have a truckload of it, and we wanted to be able to utilize that rather than being locked into something else. The replication was another issue. Many of the platforms have their own proprietary replication. In our case, the compellent was how we wanted to do it. We wanted more control over the replication, more control over being able to manage that, how we needed to given bandwidth and the like, and that was one of the driving forces here. We also wanted to make sure that it was easy to manage because as time goes by, we all know our mainframe engineers and the guys that are, the guys and gals that are the real sort of heart of this whole thing are unfortunately retiring. So it has to be something that we could hand off to a relatively inexperienced crew on the operations end. So that was part of where we were, plus vendor accessibility and flexibility. How flexible was the vendor going to be? How responsive were they? What types of support? And I know Sean has spoken to the field support being through IBM, which means if there is an issue with one of these devices, it's highly likely that the person who's going to show up on your doorstep is someone that you are familiar with in the first place, which we thought was a pretty good idea. So the decision process, and everyone does it slightly differently. You have to hit all the marks. It has to be, how do the demos go? How responsive? What are the numbers? How does that all play? But for us, we identified initially 4 potential vendors. We are a relatively small house, 110 MIPS on some Z14s, so it's not as though we have massive, so we weren't going to go for the big guns necessarily. One of the vendors we had identified as a potential had their system, it was still in beta, so we eliminated that primarily because we really didn't want to be a guinea pig, and I don't know that anyone would want to do that. It would be fine if you were just evaluating, but today was not for us. So we went about gathering facts, figuring out who was what the support features were, what the features of the actual system were, how the ongoing costs were going to be. Recognizing some of your operations are going to want to bundle it all up as purely CapEx, and some of you are going to want to have more OpEx, so there was some flexibility with how we could manage the licensure and the like. We eliminated one of the remaining 3 during the feature analysis. They had a proprietary file format. There were no options to get out of it, and additionally, they had their own replication, which again, because it was proprietary, while it's a perfectly fine vendor and perhaps in a massive house it might be a good idea, we felt that was not really in our wheelhouse. The financial analysis, again, versus CapEx, OpEx, running cost, and we had our own criteria as to how that worked. When we got down to the final decision, we happen to have a senior vice president for IT who is sometimes we like to call it analysis paralysis. He likes to see things in grids and spreadsheets and comparisons and things. So when we got to the final decision, we laid this out, and the screen itself will be relatively tough to read in particular, but to the right-hand side is how we did the financial analysis for each of them. We then brought that back to a main spreadsheet, but it provided what the CapEx, OpEx over the years, how much it was going to cost in each of our fiscal years. And to the left-hand side, that was more about what the features were, what they weren't, how the support was done, and sort of the feature set that we were looking at. So as I mentioned, in our case, we were headed down the get out of the MDL path, and our original setup was as follows. We have redundant Z14s or Z114s sitting out. One is sitting in our main headquarters data center, and one is sitting in our DR site, which is in Andover, Massachusetts. We do disk replication between our DS series storage into both, and as you can see, we had two NFS-mounted FICON-connected MDLs at each location for redundancy, and we were using the compellent storage itself to actually replicate back and forth. Each of those MDLs had 32 VSE guests for drives 1 and 2. We are a VSE and VM house, so there were 18 VM drives. We had about 10,000 Dynam tapes and another 1,000 VM tapes that ultimately we were going to have to get into the new system, along with the fact that we have 700 plus jobs that use tape. So in our case, we are not simply doing storage from backups. We actually use this as a processing system as well, and we've run through an awful lot of tape on a regular basis. In our new configuration, we went with two of the NFS-mounted ZVTs. They are the Flex models, as well as one in our DR location. We still do the NFS mounts. We still use the compellent replication, so we have control over the entire process. There is nothing about this that we can't manage for ourselves, which was a very important thing. The physical installations were complete by May 1st. Our tape migration began on June 2nd. Now, we had anticipated that it was going to take us 6 months to actually migrate those tapes. That didn't happen. What we ended up doing is we put the entire system in. We allowed all of the new scratch tapes to be mounted, be written and mounted on the ZVTs. So as we went along, out of those 10,000 tapes, we maybe had 1,000 or a few more left that had to be done manually. My fantastic VSE engineer, Jim Salvino, he did a fantastic job, and essentially he scripted the whole thing out to use Ditto, and over a weekend we got all of it done. So we were about 6 weeks and change as opposed to 6 months getting it done. So you can use these in conjunction with your existing MDL or existing virtual tape library if you have one. You could also do it in parallel with existing robotic tape if that happens to be the case. You would simply change how programmatically how the system would access, and you would initially say, if you're making a scratch tape, I don't want to have to talk to you. So that really made our world very, very simple in order to get the new system. It's been up and running since, from that point, doing everything, and has been fantastic. Like everything else, there's a minor issue here or there. It's nothing horrible. There wasn't a VSE tape mounter. However, there was a program that was from BusTech that did some of the work for us, so that got reprogrammed along with the optic engineers. That allowed us to do full integration for our automation systems, which are Zeek and Zack. There were some code linking issues, and I will not even try to tell you what that meant because it's not my bailiwick. However, Chris was ultimately intimately involved in that. So if you have a question, it can be posed to Chris on how that was done. There did need to be some assemble link commands put in, but that was very easily taken care of. And check the manual. I think that Chris and Sean, if you find enough things in there, there's a bounty, and that's a good thing. The only other thing really we ran up against is we did a migration we did an upgrade from VSE 5.4 to 6X product, and it left a couple of extra links in the frame that I'm sure that the engineers are trying to resolve now. The pathing changed a little bit, so but that's being resolved at this point. If you have questions, please put them in. I think from our perspective, it was a case where it was the right vendor. We've had great success working with them, and it allows for flexibility. It has allowed us to use our existing storage, which is fantastic because it not only does NFS for the ZVT and to work with our mainframe tapes and libraries, but it also allows us to still serve up CIF shares. It allows us to serve any number of things up on our terms as opposed to someone else's. And I think that's about it. Now I'll hand it back over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Richard. Really, really do appreciate you joining us today and providing your perspective. I know that it's always more interesting to hear from an actual user, the good and the bad, and to hear directly from a customer versus continually from the vendor. So we really appreciate that that you've joined us and that you've shared your insights. We appreciate that. So we do have some time for questions remaining. Before we open it up for questions, I did want to call your attention to the link at the bottom of the question screen here. We have a process where we will happily provide you with a design assessment. So if you have an interest in understanding what type of solution from Optica would fit your requirement, we have a link here that I believe it's a hot link. It's actually an active link. You can hit it any time. It'll take you directly to our online design assessment form, and you provide us with a little bit of information. It comes directly into me and my team, and we will, from that information that's submitted, we'll create and assess what requirement or what solution will best fit your need. And we'll create a draft design for you and send it over to you so you have an understanding of how ZVT would fit your requirement. So we're happy to step through that process. It's obviously free of charge. There's no financial commitment whatsoever. But if you're interested in understanding a little bit more about how ZVT fits your requirement, I recommend that you take advantage of that process, and we're happy to support that. Further, if anybody is interested in a more in-depth demonstration, again, as Chris mentioned, we're happy to do that. Happy to spend a little bit more time diving a little more deeply into the technology as appropriate. So, Janine, at this point, I'd love to turn it back over to you to moderate any questions.
Great. Thanks, Sean. First question. Is this storage system for use with ZOS tape or only for open systems or both?
So very good question, and I hope I didn't confuse folks with the Flex model. So the ZVT is a mainframe virtual tape solution. Attaches only to the mainframe in terms of host systems. The flexible part of our 5000 Flex model is that you can leverage open systems storage as the storage repository for the virtual volumes. So this system is designed to identically emulate 3490 tape and 3590 tape mainframe tape. So this is a mainframe application, and like every other virtual tape or virtually every other offering, it leverages open systems tape for the actual repository, the storage of the virtual volumes. Hopefully that answers that question and clarifies any confusion.
Okay. Let's go to this one. What implementation-related services can Optica provide, and who delivers them?
So Optica delivers 100% of the implementation services. So we feel it's important when somebody invests and chooses the ZVT solution, we actually go on site with our resources. We have a full team of architects. Chris is one of them, who you heard from today. We have many others who actually go on site with every implementation, and we will ensure that the installation, the configuration of the solution, the testing of the solution, and even a turnkey migration, if that's of interest to you, the customer, we will deliver those with our own resource on site and ensure that the solution is up and working and turned over to you in a satisfactory manner. So we offer all of those services from end to end to make sure that the product is going to be implemented and turned over properly to you. And as it relates to the actual migration of your data, whether it's from physical tape or from another virtual tape solution, we can offer a turnkey service to own that process for you, or we can do what we would call a migration light service, where we would strategize with you on the options for migration, help you implement the process and methodology, and test it before we leave your location. And then the rest of that process would be driven by the customer themselves. So we have a full range of migration-related services that we can offer.
Great. Thanks, Sean. I'm so glad you got to that because there's several questions in here about migration. So I want to invite everyone on the call to continue to submit your questions. I don't think we're going to get to them all today because we're approaching the top of the hour. So please know that someone will get back to you via email. And in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. And I especially want to thank Sean, Rich, and Chris for sharing their expertise with us today. Please be on the lookout for your follow-up email that will contain a link to the recording of today's webinar, as well as the link to the design assessment. And that concludes our webinar. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.